I never thought Matt Walsh would be the one to take my ally card, but there he was, waiting outside the theater, collecting them by the fistful as tearful liberals admitted we belly laughed at his comedy antics. Today I'm reviewing Am I Racist, the newest comedy movie from the Daily Wire, but I won't be playing any clips from the film, so you're safe there. This movie has Matt Walsh going undercover as a DEI agent, Borat style, for political trolling, their words. Comparing this to Borat threw me off because Borat is such a distinct, larger-than-life character, whereas Matt Walsh's undercover character is just Clark Kenting it. So seeing him hyped as the king of satire and disguise had me rolling my eyes like, come on, buddy, no, you're not. Now, having seen this movie, I would say this is better compared to Nathan For You. This movie's at its best when it's fully embracing the cringe and letting Matt Walsh embarrass himself. But I know Nathan For You hasn't crossed that cultural threshold where you can buy his costume at Spirit Halloween and people are bellowing his catchphrase 20 years later. So, alright, I get why you brought up Borat from a marketing perspective. So I admit, you win this round, Daily Wire. I'll also admit I don't disagree with this movie's central thesis. Hustlers like Robin DiAngelo have transformed white guilt into a capitalist commodity. I'll admit I'm not too well versed on the subject, but I am suspicious of this recent trend of workplace DEI. HR exists to protect the company, not the employees, and workplace DEI is its latest mutation. The thing is, the Daily Wire also wants to play into insecurities about cultural anxiety. Just like the Robin DiAngelos of the world, they're cashing checks from guys who want to consume their way into feeling like they're making a difference. Fortunately, I am the most perfectly centrist reviewer on all of YouTube. The Flat Earth guys skewed the average. I could see what the Daily Wire is doing, but still chuckle at the ways they're dunking on workplace DEI. So for me, this was a real heartwarming. The worst people you know are all fighting. The Daily Wire's intentions are slightly obscured for the purposes of the narrative, but that does make this film a much easier watch. There's a lot of times where I thought this would get into more pearl clutching and hand wringing, but they were able to keep things moving for the sake of comedy. The best scene in the movie was when Matt Walsh disguises himself as a waiter to go undercover during an upscale race to dinner soiree. He says he's not able to attend this dinner because it's specifically for white women to be educated about their racism and privilege. And you'd think the move here would be for him to throw on a she-her pronoun pin and insist he's a woman, but instead he sulks into the background as a waiter and eavesdrops. Except he's terrible at being a waiter. It's hilarious. It's a solid scene that plays the greatest hits for ways somebody can be bad at being a waiter, and I was howling the whole time. Eventually, Matt Walsh does find an opportunity to verbally interject during the dinner. He gives his feedback on the racially charged discussion. The scene keeps rolling, full cringe ahead, and it's perfect. But the scene has an interesting underlying message. That is, these workshops and dinners exist to assuage the feelings of white guilt from those privileged enough to afford a ticket to these fancy dinners. If they brought this to the forefront, the scene could be ruined. This film went about this in the perfect way. Whenever speaking to someone who charges an appearance or consultation fee, there's a ticker that shows how much they cost. But I'm also thinking, shut up, Matt Walsh, you're a millionaire. Don't act like you don't have a speaking fee. You don't have to know the entire extended Daily Wire universe to enjoy this movie, but there is a brief flashback to Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? I haven't seen that one, because my answer to that question is, I don't care. Towards the end of the movie, Matt Walsh interviews Robin DiAngelo, and I thought he was going to bring up a trans analogy as a bait or dunk, but he doesn't. The initial chunk of his interview with Robin DiAngelo was painful. He was fumbling hardcore by presenting her with all of these pithy hypotheticals, and I was like, just no, what are you doing? This is the guy. How are you not going harder? Eventually, Matt Walsh does turn it around by asking his black friend to join in on the interview, and it hilariously escalates to Robin DiAngelo rifling through her purse so she can give some cash as reparations. It was a fantastic save. The one-on-one interview scenes are going to be the biggest hit or miss part of the movie. Each interview had at least one solid joke in the mix, but I was still thinking like, okay, but that's just one guy. Who cares? When Matt Walsh is doing his bit in a group setting, that's when things get way more interesting. However, the worst, absolute worst part of the movie was when Matt Walsh instructs his own DEI class. This is in the last act of the film, so if you need a pee break, that's the time to take it. But the tides have turned, and now that Matt Walsh is the one calling the shots instead of yes-anding with bizarro liberal antics, the movie turns into such a slog. The scenes don't go crazy enough, but at different points a few people do leave the class when things get a little bit too kooky for their tastes. But as an outside observer, I'm like, alright, yeah, I could see why that guy left, but I'm not laughing over what's actually happening. I wanted his DEI class to get insane and really test people like the Milgram experiment or Impractical Jokers. Also, this is more of a nitpick, but that scene played this cutesy music that overstays its welcome. It's the BGM used for either comedy antics or Elves and Santa's Workshop. It is so bad. And it goes on for way too long. It's like, okay, man, I get it. I'm lubed up for some hijinks. You could tone it the fuck down. This was the only thing from a directing standpoint that felt cheap and clumsy, but otherwise, I thought the audiovisual directing was mostly fine. The high point for the directing was a scene where they reenacted the Juicy Smollett hoax and they continuously retconned the scene to keep up with its tall tale. That was pretty cool. And as far as directorial sleight of hands go, try to stay aware of who they're interviewing and why. Side note, the bit from Wilfred Riley, the author of Hate Crime Hoax, was pretty interesting. I believe he was the only academic type who pushed back against the sensationalist neoliberalist mindset, but given the intentions of this film, they can't interview too many outliers. I have no problem admitting that this was an enjoyable watch, but I know this is propaganda. This film sees the wrong way to talk about race as the liberal grifters in their ivory towers versus the blue collar, salt of the earth guys who judge you by the content of your character. And I do agree with both. Those grifters in academia can buzz off and deserve to be bullied, and I agree with those guys in the biker bar and that mechanic who, as far as I can tell, just want everyone to get along. But it did feel like a lot of cherry picking to further a narrative. Okay, I know nobody's coming to me for politics, so I'm gonna keep this snappy. Racism sucks, it's definitely a problem, but I don't know if the feel good platitudes about race, seemingly presented in opposition to the out of touch liberals, will fix things on a systemic level. They say they want to find out, am I racist? Alright, fine. I guess they're not interested in a bigger solution, just kind of patting its audience on the back and reassuring them that the liberals out of touch, and you and your drinking buddies got it figured out. And ultimately, Daily Wire really wants you to know that liberals, bad. So this narrative is painting some pretty broad strokes. I know this can be hand waved with, hey dumbass, it's a comedy movie. And my true guiding light is comedy. The mid budget comedy movie's been dead for a hot minute. It's interesting that this movie even exists, and it got a theatrical release. I'm not particularly in touch with the comedy fandom, so I wonder if there's anybody hyping this movie up the same way the cartoon fandom would lose its mind if Disney dropped a new 2D film. If you don't take politics too seriously and you enjoy hidden camera prank comedy, you will have a great time with this film. This is easily the best thing Daily Wire's made, so it does come with that bias, but it is significantly lower than what they gave us in Mr. Bertram or Lady Ballers. And if you're a lefty and you chuckle at this movie and the Daily Wire cronies come a knocking to take your ally card, I'll tell you what you gotta do. You just gotta put it in your back pocket and tease them with a sassy, come and take it. They'll either leave you alone or you'll have a hilarious story about someone's saucy little secret.